Okay, so we have some given information. JY is perpendicular to YO. We learned yesterday, well, we always knew this, but we didn't necessarily know why. We learned if two lines are perpendicular, then they form a right angle, right? So we learned how to justify that. That's the definition of perpendicular lines. So JY is perpendicular to YO. So by definition of perpendicular lines, we have a right angle. NS is perpendicular to SO. So by definition of perpendicular lines, we have a right angle. JO is congruent to NO. So we are allowed to add a marking that shows that they're congruent. And O is the midpoint of YS. We talked about yesterday how if a point is a midpoint, then by definition of midpoint, YO is congruent to OS. So that's what that justifying statements was about. It's like it was answering the question of why are we allowed to add markings to our picture? What allows us to do that? So, yep, you're getting it right. Now that you take a look at this picture, you realize that this is a right triangle with tick marks on a leg and tick marks on a hypotenuse. And when you have all three of those statements, then you can conclude that these two triangles are guilty of being congruent by HL, hypotenuse, leg. Let's take a look at our homework answers. So what this is, you don't know 26 and 29. You might not have known these yet because that's today's lesson. So if you didn't do those two, that's okay. But this is a baby step to proofs. This is baby step number 1. Today is going to be baby step number 2, and then tomorrow will be baby step number 3, and Friday we will write a proof. So that's the goal. So take a look, compare your answers. Any of the ones you got wrong, you need to ask about, because these are the only acceptable answers to these problems. I see all sorts of things that students put, and if it doesn't look like this, then it's wrong. Other than if you abbreviated, we allow you to abbreviate. Okay, starting with number 7. Nope, not that one. That's tonight's homework. Okay, number 7. This one is going to come up a lot, and a lot, and a lot. Sorry about that. Okay, number 7 is the number 1 property on your sheet. It's called the reflexive property. I like to think of it as reflexive, kind of like reflective, like a reflection in a mirror. When you look in a mirror, you see yourself. Look at AC. AC is looking in the mirror and seeing AC. AC is congruent to AC. It's just saying that a segment is congruent to itself. You are congruent to yourself in a mirror. So it's the reflexive property. Don't put reflective just because I gave you that example. Reflexive property. And we're going to use this one a lot, so get used to it. Number 11. If BC is congruent to CD, then C is the midpoint of BD. See, I'm telling you, it's having focusing issues. Okay. Guys, a lot of times the answer is in the question. A lot of times the answer is in the question. Look, it says the word midpoint, and so the answer is the definition of midpoint. If you go and you look at your paper, on the definition of midpoint, it'll say, if C is the midpoint of BD, then BC is congruent to CD. Our first quiz over justifying statements, that one's on Monday. We have a quiz on Thursday and Friday, but it's just over side angle side again. So today's lesson, the title of it is CPCTC. Say that 10 times fast. CPCTC, CPCTC, CPCTC. So, yeah. A lot of you somehow already know what it is. I guess you've already studied this just for fun or something. But in my other classes, I am going to play hangman, and we're going to find out what it really means. But we can't really play hangman here because y'all already know what it is. Some of you already learned it. And so CPCTC does stand for So write this down in your notes as I'm writing it. Here's what it means. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. It pretty much is just saying that if you've done all the work to prove two triangles guilty of being congruent, and you've proved side, angle, side, well then guess what? Those angles that didn't have markings on them, those are congruent as well. You already know the principle of this, you just didn't know what it was called. You already knew the idea of this, you just didn't know what it was called. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, in other words, like I said, if you've proven that, you can't read that, it's too light, isn't it? If you've proven the triangle is congruent, then every piece of the triangle is congruent to the corresponding piece of the other triangle. So we're going to put CPCTC into practice. And we're going to kind of be doing one sentence long proofs at the bottom there when we reveal our answer. So take a look at this example. Is angle B congruent to angle E? And a few days ago you would have said, sorry, I don't know, because there's no arcs on this picture and I'm not allowed to assume. So you would have said, I don't know. But today, now we do know. So this is how it works. First you say, triangle BAC is congruent to triangle EDF. Then you have to say why. You have to back it up. By side, angle, side. Do you see the tick marks? The side, the angle, and then the side? So you say the triangles are congruent by side, angle, side. What does that symbol mean? Do you know what the three dots mean? Starts with a T. Therefore, good job, Chloe. Therefore, angle B is congruent to angle E by CPCTC. So I want you to write this sentence down. I want you to write that whole math sentence down. It's like a one-sentence proof. It's a baby step to a proof. Moving right along. Example 2. Is angle 1 congruent to angle 2? Explain using a congruence theorem. So the way this works is that we don't know if angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. There are no markings and we have no way to add an arc to this picture. We have no reason to add an arc. So first, we have to prove the triangle's congruent. So first, what we're going to do is we're going to add tick marks to BC because we know the reflexive property lets us do that. And then we're going to say that the triangles are congruent. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle, make sure you're writing this with me, DBC by side, 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 comma. Therefore, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2 by CPCTC. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. It's just saying if the triangles are congruent, then every part of the top triangle is congruent to a part of the bottom triangle. Okay, ready to check your answer? Did you write one down? Do you have one to check? Hopefully. All right, so the first thing we would do is add tick marks to the shared side. It's called the reflexive property. So first we have to say they're congruent. Triangle ADC is congruent to triangle BDC by, what'd you get? Don't say hypotenuse leg, because just because it's a right triangle doesn't mean it's hypotenuse leg. Okay, by side, angle, side. Therefore, angle A is congruent to angle B by CPCTC. Good job. Now we're going to do drawing and supporting conclusions. So what we're doing is we're doing exactly what we did on Monday, except now I'm not giving you the conclusion. You have to come up with the conclusion and the why. Okay? So let's practice. Point D is the midpoint of AC. What's the conclusion? Hopefully you're saying that if D really is the midpoint, then segment AD is congruent to segment DC. Because that's what you would do, right? you would immediately go to your picture and you would add tick marks. All we're asking you to do is say, what do those tick marks mean? What do those tick marks mean? They mean that AD is the same exact length as DC. So it's telling you to back up your symbols is what it's telling you to do. And then Y, definition of midpoint. And we already did that yesterday. We already did the Y Monday and Tuesday. Next one. BD bisects ABC. So you ask yourself, if I knew that that was a bisector, what would I add to my picture? Well, I would add arcs. Well, when I add arcs, what do those arcs really mean? Those arcs mean that angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD. Y, definition of angle bisector. So it's just saying, hey, if I know this one piece of information is true, what can I do about it and why can I do that? What can I do about it and why can I do it? Keep going? Yes? Okay, next one. Think in your head what the conclusion is. Think in your head, write it down somewhere. I'm going to cheat a little bit so I don't have to keep naming this with 3 letters. And I'm going to call this angle 1 and angle 2. On the test, we'll put those numbers there for you. I know. So my conclusion is that angle 1, well, here, I'm going to do this. No, I'm going to do this. Angle 1 and angle 2 are right angles. Now, you could have also put the measure of angle 1 equals the measure of angle 2 equals 90. Or you could have put measure of angle 1, comma, measure of angle 2 equals 90. Here's what I want to enforce. Here's where I need you to listen. You cannot put that angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Perpendicular does not mean congruent. Now, are they congruent? Yes. But is that the conclusion that goes with perpendicular? No, that is not the conclusion that goes with perpendicular. So you can say that they're right angles, but you can't say that they're congruent yet. Why? Definition of perpendicular lines. On your sheet where it says notes for proofs, it says definition of perpendicular lines, but underneath it, it also says, this shortcut. If perpendicular, then right angle. So either of those would be perfectly acceptable. Quan, all right angles are congruent, and that would be your next step, but that would not be your conclusion to this given. That is not the conclusion to that given. If you said that they're congruent, then you have skipped a step, is what I'm saying. Okay, next one. BD bisects AC. Now be careful. People get confused of which segment is doing the bisecting and which segment is getting bisected. AC is the one getting bisected. So AC is the one getting cut in half. So be careful. Conclusion. AD is congruent to CD. The reason? Definition of segment bisector. You have to put that it's a segment bisector. You can't just put definition of bisector because I need to know if it's a segment or an angle bisector. Okay? Next one. Given AB is congruent to BC. There are actually 2 acceptable conclusions for this one. 2 acceptable conclusions. What do you think? What's the first one going to be? Okay, that's a conclusion. Triangle ABC is isosceles, and that would be Y. That would be definition of isosceles triangle. Let me write isosceles first. What's the other acceptable answer? Do y'all know the other acceptable answer? Yeah, okay. No, they're already congruent. That's the given. It's given that they're congruent. The other acceptable answer would be angle A is congruent to angle C. And take a look at your sheet and find what the Y is for that one. What's the Y? Look at number 41 on your sheet. Look at number 41 on your sheet. That's a long sentence. Do you see number 41? So the one that goes with purple would be, if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then the opposite angles are congruent. That's number 41 on your sheet. It is a long sentence. Okay, next one. Given AB is parallel to CD. What is the conclusion? I want to know what y'all think. First, you have to tell me the conclusion, then you can tell me the why. Good. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Now, a lot of students mess this up. Are you watching? You need to bold the lines that are parallel in the transversal. And when you bold all of that, you're going to get the letter Z. And when you have the letter Z, you should be able to tell which two are congruent. Some students are going to put angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. Some students are going to put angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and only one group of those students are going to be correct. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. It's not 3 and 4 because those are not inside our Z. Those are not our alternate interior angles. And then you all knew the Y. Very good. The Y is if parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Now, I'm going to have people on the quiz over this stuff. I'm going to have people under the Y, and they're just going to put AIA. Are they going to get that problem right? No. You have to have all the pieces. You have to have if parallel, then alternate interior angles are congruent. You even need the congruent symbol. Okay? We've already shortened that sentence a ton for you. We made it all into symbols. But you can't just put AIA. That is the lazy way out, and you're not being thorough. Okay? Last one. Given AC is congruent to AC, AB is congruent to AD, and BAC is congruent to DAC, what can we conclude? We can conclude, kind of like we did earlier today, that triangle BAC is congruent to triangle DAC. And the reason is side angle side. And then if we were to keep going and we were to say angle B is congruent to angle D, the Y would be CPCTC. No, you're not, Anna. No, you're not. I just got asked if you're allowed to use that notes page on your quizzes and tests. You're not allowed to use it, but honestly, there's only a couple of things on there that you would need to memorize. The rest of the stuff you already know. If you see perpendicular in the question, then the answer is definition of perpendicular. If you see midpoint in the question, the answer is definition of midpoint. So very few things on there do you not already know in your brain. The point is that, I was asked, why do you say that AC is congruent to AC? The point is so that you will go to your picture and you will add a tick mark there. The point is to say that that is one of the pieces that's congruent. Because if you don't have that piece, you won't be able to prove the triangle is guilty of being congruent. It's a piece to the proof. It's like a puzzle. Ooh, I said that was the last one. I'm sorry. Let's do this last one. A is congruent to D. 1 is congruent to 2. BC is congruent to CE. The conclusion is that the triangles are congruent, and the reason is angle, angle, side, right? I hope this is all. There we go. Okay, your homework is quite a lengthy homework, so if you don't want to do all of those, I'd rather you just say, I'm scared you're just going to say I'm not going to do it because it's too long. So if you would rather not do all of those, here's a shorter assignment that will hit on the major points of what we're doing. You can still do all of them, and I will still have the answers to all of them. But if you want to shorten your homework, like you have a lot of stuff to do in your other classes, here's a way to shorten it, where you'll still get what you need to get from the homework.